Hello, today I've got my Confessions of a Ghostwriter hat on, and I'm going to go right to the beginning. I'm going to talk about how I identify people I would like to write with and how I go about what I do, basically, at the very, very start. Because I have a slightly different way of going about things. A lot of ghostwriters will be attached to a publisher or certain publishers, and they'll hear from either directly or from a literary agent, we'd like you to go and write with this person, go and meet them, see if you get on with them. What I've always done is, I've always been a little bit more selfish in the sense that, as opposed to, I don't want somebody to choose who I write with, I'd like to choose who I write with. So I will identify somebody who I am a fan of or who I think has a commercially viable book in them, and I'll get in touch with them. Literally, that's the first one I did was Torval and Dean. I'd written two or three biographies, and I kind of enjoyed it, but I didn't particularly like having my name on the front of the book. It's just a bit too much responsibility, and I forget why, but I thought, well, why don't I try and ghostwrite? Because I was aware of ghostwriters. I didn't know any, but I was aware, and I was thinking about it purely commercially, and I think I was watching an episode of Dancing on Ice, believe it or not, because nothing else was on. Nothing else was on, and it was bizarre. And I remember thinking, Torval and Dean, I've never seen anything by them in the shops. And I looked online, and they had done something back in the early 80s, so sort of 40 years ago at least. So I thought, well, and I think it was coming up to the end of what was supposed to be the last series of Dancing on Ice. So I thought it was sort of now or never. And I went on their website and I wrote them an email. Their manager, who happened to be Jane's husband, and I sort of said, let's write a book. I sort of said, I'm a writer, would you like to go? I didn't say I was an experienced ghostwriter, but I didn't say I wasn't. I didn't say that I'd never done it before either. And they got back in touch. So I had a literary agent, Tim, at Peters, Fraser and Dunlop, and I wrote a proposal, a very detailed one with sample chapters. It took an age, and Tim took it out to market, and it eventually got bought by Simon & Schuster, huge publisher, massive, and they paid a big amount of money for it, and I was well remunerated. And had I just been a ghost for hire, they'd have said, this is what you get, there you go, just do it. It would have been very transactional. But the way I did it, I devised it, I was more invested in the project. So it wasn't my book, but I was there. It was my idea. So I was kind of the founder of the feast, if you see what I mean, which I prefer. I wouldn't like to be just to come in, shake the hands, do the book, and then go away. As I said, it's transactional. I'm more into sort of relationship. And then I got to meet them. Went to a couple of, Dancing on Ice was touring at the time, and I went to a couple of shows, and they were lovely. But I tell you what, it was a real baptism of fire. Usually now what I would do is I would arrange to do a series of interviews with Brian Blessed. It was 3 weeks. Usually with Gunter, the second book, probably about a week. But I would need a good sort of 20 hours, really, just to start me off with, 15 to 20 hours. But because of time constraints, I had 3 weeks to break the back of the book, 100,000 words, and I had to do it in 3 weeks. And then I could sort of like refine it afterwards. But I didn't have time to do the interview separately because the tour had finished. Jane lived in Kent. Chris lived in Colorado. So what we had to do was I went to Cyprus and I basically had them on Zoom separately for however many hours a day. So I did the interviews and then wrote it. I've never done it like that since. It's a horrible way of doing it. And so it was a head fuck. It was absolutely horrible. And I was working from 7 in the morning till about 9 at night. It was 3 weeks, 7 days a week. It was horrific. And oh God, it's a horrible memory actually. But I broke the back of the book, and then I returned to England, and basically we started, they would say, can we do this? Can we do that? And another sort of week or so, and we had it ready to submit, which was amazing. I've never done it since. I've never want to do it again. I mean, I can usually write a book in 3 weeks if I've got the interviews all done. But this was just something else. Everything was done sort of in real time. It was awful. But it sold really, really well. It was a bestseller and great. And I suppose in hindsight, it was the baptism of fire I needed, because after that, everything else, I'm not saying was easy or has been easy, it hasn't. but I was sort of prepared for anything, if you know what I mean. And then every book, I always say this, but every book is different. The one I did after that was the aforementioned Mr. Blessed. And then you get ones like, obviously Gunter, the first one with Gunter Steiner, that was a diary. So we did that over a year, little bits and pieces, and I've done that several times now. But the one I did with Timothy West a couple of years ago, the dearly departed Timothy West, with obviously about his marriage to the equally dearly departed Prunella Scales, Prue and me, that was done over about 9 months. But I was in no hurry with that one because Tim was quite old at the time. He was 88, 89, and we just had to take that easy. So I thought, I'm not sort of rushing in doing a week's worth of interviews and then buggering off to the Canaries or wherever and writing it. And we were under no pressure from the publisher, which was great. So we could take our time with that one, and it was wonderful because it gave me 9 months with Tim and Prue, which was just amazing. Bernard Cribbins, the same, because Bernard was in his late 80s at the time. It wasn't something, the pressure was on, but I had to sort of manage it, if you see what I mean. So these days, if somebody comes in and says, right then, I want to publish this book, this idea of yours, but I need it in a month, it's not a problem, providing I get the material. You're only as good as the material you get with this book. So anyway, that's how I identify people. So I will literally think of somebody. I'll have brainstorm sessions with my literary agent, and we'll go through different industries, what's hot at the moment, what isn't, and I will send off emails. I'll just send off emails just saying, explaining why I think we should write this book, what book I think we should write. So I don't just say, fancy writing a book, I think I can make you some money. There's a lot more to it than that. If you've got any questions, then please let me know. I'm always happy to answer them. But that's what I do. And I do have certain favourites. I like my motorsport, so I've done probably 6 or 7 in motorsport. You know, Jason Plato, Johnny Herbert and Damien Hill, Gunter, Dougie Lampkin, and I'd like to do more. I'm doing a 3rd book with Gunter at the moment about MotoGP because he's bought a MotoGP team. But I'm always thinking, if this is your business model, if this is the way you go about things, as opposed to waiting for somebody to contact you, you're always thinking, if I'm watching TV, I've always got one eye on, oh, that person could be good for a book, regardless, and I don't have to be interested in the subject matter, in the industry, if you like. You know, I wasn't that interested in ice skating, but for a time when I was writing that book, I knew more about Torval and Dean and ice skating than anyone else on earth. Well, not about ice skating, but you immerse yourself. You really, really do immerse yourself in it. And if that person says, yes, I'm talking to an Isle of Man TT rider at the moment. I've always been a fan. But the reason I came up with that idea was because it's been 10 years since an Isle of Man TT rider has written a book. If you think about it, it's a very popular sport. So think about the amount of books that come out, you know, Formula One, football, most sports. But TT, that audience has been starved of material. So I thought, well, surely there aren't that many who have a public profile. They're almost like mythical figures, TT riders. But I'm talking to one at the moment, and I think we'll get one away. But anyway, in a nutshell, that's how I do it. What would I advise? What you need first, it's not a case of contacting a literary agent. If you contact a literary agent, I'd like to be a ghostwriter. Even if you have a history of writing, it's going to be quite difficult because you're not bringing anything to the party. What I would do, or you're not bringing any experience or any opportunity. What I would do, you see, when I first wrote to Torval and Dean, I already had a literary agent, but that made no difference because I didn't mention them in the pitch. They didn't know I had a literary agent. So I would still have made the approach, and then I would have contacted the literary agent, and I would have said, look, I'm a writer, I'm looking at doing a book with Torval and Dean, they're interested. Then the literary agent will want to see you because obviously you've already made the approach, you've got the opportunity, and they're going to be interested. So don't let it put you off. If you've got no experience but you think you can do it, then give it a go. That's what I would have done it, as I said, without any shadow of doubt. And I very, very rarely mention the fact that I have a literary agent, you know, when I make an approach, even today. But that's what you need to do. And yeah, it's a good life. The thing about being a ghostwriter, you need to you do need to park your ego, because you know, you hear stories of ghostwriters going into bookshops, seeing books that they've written that don't have their name on, you know, and then sort of getting angry, etc. I don't care. I really genuinely don't care. I just, you see, because it's the ones I've written my idea, I've devised them, I feel invested and I feel satisfied that, you know, it might not be my name in the front, but that was my idea. And if I hadn't thought of it, it wouldn't be there. And that's good enough for me. But I like talking about what I do. And I'm quite proud. You know, I think a lot of people look down on ghostwriters or collaborative writers. A lot of established writers do. I know that for a fact. I've heard some horrible stories. Thank God I haven't met these people, because I'd have a few things to say and potentially do to them. But anyway, if you have any questions, please put them in the comments or send me an email. Always happy to receive emails and to engage directly like that. And I'll make sure that my email address is in the bio. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.